my background was engineering and with a minor in psychology, and and that led me to get a job as a project manager for a couple of MNOs before I landed at Vodacom. And then what happened is that we made a shift from doing projects the old-fashioned Prince 2 and PMP way to doing projects more on this agile way. And our main concerns was twofold. We wanted to figure out how we can build a product the right way, because Vodacom is a massive organization that we can't afford bringing out stuff that can break. And you know, when you do things fast, things can tend to break, right? And we also want to make sure that we're doing this is the right product. The right product, and this is and we also wanted to be very focused, customer driven. And what we use in order to go down the middle of that is agile methodology, okay? And basically what this means is iteratively learning from your releases. So we will do a release, and we'll learn, and then we'll do another release, okay? My topic here today is demystifying the myth of the MVP. How many people know what an MVP is? Yeah? And for those who are sports fans, the MVP does not mean most valuable players. Actually, MVP means, who can say it? All right. So it means minimum viable product. Okay. When I first started my role at Vodacom, I had a couple concerns on this because, again, deep-rooted project management background, and we know that minimum can sometimes mean that we give the customers what they really don't want. Meaning, for example, people use, especially engineers. There's few engineers here, but especially engineers, they like to cop out and say that they built the most minimum thing, and then they bring it out to the customers, but they completely forget that it has to be viable, right? So in addressing this issue, what me and my team do in order to address this issue iteratively is we focus. We know that there's a scale here, and on this scale, let's say it's value going up, right? The value of whatever you're building, your product, your startup, and on this scale is how hard it is, right? Let's call it minimum. All right, let's call it minimum, right? Going down, right? When there's a customer, they have different problems. Let's put scattered issues across the board. Customers will have, right? When you ask an engineering team or engineer to pick a minimum viable product, of course they'll pick something that's the easiest thing to do, right here. And they say that these three problems, I can release them for you in a release, okay? And then, but then when you ask a business person as to what is the most, they'll also pick this high value items right here, right? We realize that this is a struggle, so we came up with a very simple method for relieving the tension between the two, business versus the delivery team, okay? And has anyone worked in an agile team before? Meaning halfway. What do you mean? What did you do?
I work with a tech team that was developing products as well, and I was not in the developing team exactly, but I was in the managing team. So
Okay,
I was not directly working with them.
You were a product owner? Were you a product person?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So with agile, all it means is we do things, like I said in the beginning, iteratively, right? We give a time frame, meaning of, like, let's say 2 weeks, to come up with a solution for these problems in which I drew on my earlier screen. We have to come up with a solution and bring it out to the market. So we have sprints. These sprints can go any different amount of time, but once you finish one sprint, you have to go to the next sprint. We at Vodacom we do sprints of 2 weeks, but you can range up to a month based on the speed of your team once you guys find a cadence. When it comes to building an MVP, there are different ways to target it. Okay. The first way, what most people think when they're building an MVP is that, let's say we have 4 quarters. Okay, let's say 4 different works or sprints that you have to do, right? And in the first sprint, let's say the business goal that you want to achieve is, let's say you want to build a car. I don't know how to draw a car. All right. Let's say you want to build a car for someone, and you know this car plus a happy customer equals what? Money, right? Money for you guys, right? So what most companies do when they want to build a car, they will spend a long time, or let's say a product at that which will make a customer happy. They'll spend a long time. They'll spend a lot of cash. They'll burn through a lot of cash, and then they'll reach at the end of the sprint, and they'll realize that the customer did not get exactly what they wanted, right? So this is how they will do it in. Let's do it in a form in which everyone will understand. Let's say each quarter, your team is supposed to release something to the customer, right? So quarter 1, you'll go to the delivery team and you'll talk to them, and they'll say, okay, MVP, we got to build something very minimum, right? So what's the minimum most things you can do in building this car? Any ideas? Yeah.
Maybe start with the chases.
The chases.
Alright.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
Okay.
basic things.
Just basic things. We can start with the chases, right? And maybe put tires on it. But you see what happened in quarter 1 is the customer really didn't get what they wanted, right? So what you'll end up having here is a customer who is upset, right? Quarter 2, we can add on to the chases. Let's say we're gonna at least put a board on the chases, right? But yet it's still not what the customer wanted, and they're actually at this point probably getting angry a bit, saying, "Hey, what's going on?" And this goes on and on until you reach the delivery of the car that you actually intended to have. So with an MVP, we want you to focus. We want you to shift your ideas from saying the minimal thing to actually being the minimal most viable thing, meaning that you and your team should ask yourself, when someone wants to build a car, what intrinsically do they really need? Anyone? Exactly, yes. They need transport. So you still have the same amount of quarters here, right? And the simple most thing that you can build, you have to build a minimum viable product, but you have to build something at least that can give transport, which is the value which the customer is actually looking for. So what we say in our practice is that at least build something in which can transport me. You know, the customer, and let's say with the minimum time that we have, which is always time slot. Let's say we can only get a skateboard. How many people know what a skateboard is? We can only get a skateboard here, right? Right? But the customer here is like, meh. But the truth is that the business gains that you get from building something minimum is that you get the money to come back immediately. You get the money to come back immediately into your business, right? And from the product point of view, from the product people, is that you get more information. The customers will start using the skateboard, right? They start using the skateboard, or this is quarter 1, right? they start using the skateboard and they tell you, man, this skateboard is it's low, man. I really don't. I'm transport. We have some customers who get the transport they need, but you're not actually realizing more. So you grow from there, and you then figure out, okay, how better else can I build maybe at this point I could build a bicycle, right? Right? Yeah, this is elementary drawing, guys. This is and in the end, okay, over here there's still meh. But what you need to understand is that the amount of customers in which you had here are maybe, for example, maybe 2 customers. They said that it can be transported through a skateboard, but with going up in scale, you probably going to 10 and 4 more. And this helps drive the learning and the development of the product until its fruition, until you guys actually have a car which the customer will actually be happy. The next quarter you guys can say like, okay, I want a motorcycle, right? I'm not trying to draw a motorcycle, right? Right? A motorcycle, you guys get the idea, in which the customer starts getting happy, in which they're starting to get the motor vehicle that they actually wanted, until finally they can actually get the car that they wanted, right? But meanwhile, throughout the entire process, you've not only been growing. Say this is 50. This is 100. You've not only been growing, but you've been making customers happy along the way. And this can happen in services industries as well, not just product industries, in which you need to understand that in this first chart that I made, that there's customers all across this board. There's no point of you waiting or not learning from the product itself and ending up choosing a product or building a minimum viable product which doesn't necessarily bring revenue and doesn't necessarily bring you positive information to make your product better in the long run, okay? So that is a crash course in MVP. I don't know if it is. Does anyone have any questions, eh? That's not related to my drawings.
I think I'm loud enough.
Hello. This sounds nice. Okay, it's a simple question. I think the purpose of MVP, first of all, is to learn, yeah, while you're building your product, your service. So before you land to the MVP, there is any process behind that, or you straight up you go to MVP?
Absolutely. Being able to draw this graph, you will need to go out and do your homework. You will need to figure out what are the eccentric points, pain points that our customers are having, so that you actually can draw it out and figure out, okay, there's this problem, there's this problem, there's this problem. So I would say that the first initial thing is to talk to your customers and figuring out the problems there are. They might have many problems, and your perfect solution will be solution for the entire thing. Will be like, okay, I'm going to build an operating system, right? But maybe they just want to write letters to their grandma, meaning that you'll create a word processor, for example. You create something very minimal, but based on the information that you already had, based on talking to the customers and identifying their pain points, and then going back and talking to your developers and identifying their which one is easiest and which one is hard. I remember when I just going back in my presentation, I knew I was supposed to show you how we divide. You guys know the concept of user stories? All right, user stories are short statements that represent a value to a customer. So in the past, in traditional project management, there used to be requirements documentation, in which there'll be long list of requirements that the IT team will get, and then they will say, okay, so you want to do this, all right? But it'll pass from one person to another, but then you realize when it gets to the end of the it's nothing like what was written in the requirements document because they went through that entire learning process. So a user story goes like this. It says, as a, and then you put the name of the user, right? And this can be anyone, as a bookkeeper or your customer. All right. You said you're an entrepreneur, right? Yeah. So who's your primary customer? Okay. As a uni students, right? So name one pain point in which they need to do, and you write. So finish your statements. I will need. To, and then you put dash dash. What is one pain point in which university students will like to do and your business solves for?
Losing high amount of money during a transaction when they want to do they want to transact, they want to withdraw their cash from ATMs or from their mobile phone.
So I'll need to save on my transaction fees. All right. I'll need to save. Save on right? Transaction. Sorry guys, my handwriting is atrocious. So that is one user story. That will represent one dot on that chart in which I drew. So you gather all the user stories that you guys will need. You'll take these user stories, you'll give it to your engineering team or anyone who's helping you out. They will give you a relative estimation of how how hard this is. And what we do in Scrum, we don't do estimations based on time. Because when someone asks you how hard is it to build, for example, it's the Empire State Building, right? They really, and they've never done it before, right? They won't be able to give you the right time. So we do something called, we do our estimation based on pseudo Fibonacci scale. You guys heard of pseudo Fibonacci scale? Yeah? So the Fibonacci scales is the one that goes up in increment by itself each time, right? So they will. So can you give me the pseudo Fibonacci scale starting at 1? Huh? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Uh-huh. 16. So when we get to 16, we don't exactly say 16. That's why we call it pseudo. So we go to 20, right? And then we go to 40, and then we go to 60, and then we go to 100. So what does this really help us do? This helps us identify the amount of work. So when a developer says that one user story is a 20, for example, right? You can say as a business owner, you can be like, okay, it's a 20. But then when you give them another user story, and then they also say a 20, you now have a relative comparison. Agile is ran by something called empirical knowledge, meaning that we only make planning based on what we know. We don't make planning based on what we don't know. So based on what you know, that that story A was a 20, and the story B, is it harder or easier than a 20? And then they'll let you know, oh no, this is easier. Is it twice as easy, or is it or is it like just a little bit of easy? They'll be like, okay, no, it can be an 8, right? So now you have two stories, and their relative size, for deployment or creating your MVP. In actually running the actual Scrum itself, in order to make that making that product, you of course need to know what is the maximum number in which your team can do. But then we'll talk about that during our break, which goes deeper into Scrum methodology. Yeah. Is there any other question? And we can talk about Scrum, we can talk about MVP, but we can even talk about Agile.
Could you perhaps share with us a bit more around some of the challenges you faced applying this across the teams, or any resistance you may have?
Okay, all right, fantastic. So, in a large organization, you'll have people who have been used to doing things a certain way. And it's good because that's how they keep these organizations going. Organization don't like changing. That's why you'll find organization with a lot of policy. I don't know if it'll be useless for a startup to start writing policy on how to do projects, but you'll come to Vodacom, you'll find out there's policy for how to do projects. So the hardest thing to change was the mindset of the implementers of delivering projects and figuring out from them to abandon that and start doing things smaller but more frequently. So that's the hardest challenge that we have to go to. But the good thing is that we see the results. When I drew this first image, in which had a couple of angry customers, we just sat down and we realized we don't want customers angry every once in a while. Yeah, we want to learn from our mistakes as fast as possible. We want to instill that culture of learning in our product team, in our design team, in our engineering team, across the entire organization. Yeah. Any other?
Thank you for the presentation. The question is, you have adopted Scrum,
Yes.
but that was the design from some people.
Yes.
In the same way, MVP. Why can't you come up with something like maybe minimum lovable product? Because you are saying we are currently thinking about user.
Yeah.
We are human-centered designer.
Yes.
So you're coming with something which is most lovable to someone, but there's no way there's no weaknesses that you have ever found in Scrum or MVP, and think of coming with something else which will really be advocating or spreading this way of customers.
Okay. One thing about business agility, in which I started in my first slide, is that you have to constantly. You're right. You have to constantly test what you already know. Right. You constantly have to test what you already know, and you do this by going to the market. We found out that the amount of time that is wasted in creating something that is not viable, doesn't give any value to the customer, and having to wait for it was too much. We just ended up finding that, hey, there's a word for it. It's called MVP. Yeah? But I do challenge it sometimes. One of the challenges in which I challenge is this P. And how I talk to my teams is that, okay, they say this is a minimal viable product, right? But I think it's most beneficial to actually think about it as a minimal viable problem in which you're actually trying to solve. Because at the end of the day, when you release whatever, or when you release an MVP, it has to be catering or solving a bundle of products, a bundle of problems, not a bundle of products. So don't think so much about the product itself. Think more along the lines as to the problems you're solving in your user stories. Think more along the lines of these. Okay?
Last question was,
Yeah.
in this era of big data, how are you relating to decision making when you're about to come up with new products in the organization?
Okay. In this area of big data, we use big data a lot. I can say that. Maybe you can ask more. Maybe a more specific.
Okay, I wanted to know which tricks, because I'm a startup and
Yeah.
also I'm coming up, so I would like to learn something from what are you doing with at least, and now I know Scrum, but I would also want
Okay.
to know a bit.
So in Agile and in all accelerators, what we would like to instill on them is to use the data that you have already in order to build up on. Don't try to reach for knowledge that is, or from knowledge from something that you haven't. Knowledge is what's the saying that says knowledge is applied wisdom, right? So knowledge is useless unless you have applied it, right? So with the limited information that you have, limited data sources, data points that you have, try to use that. And that's actually how we do it in our organization. We have so many different Scrum teams in our organization. And yes, there is cross-learning of information, but we do try to instill the drive from them themselves to learn empirically. On every single sprint, you have to improve upon the previous sprint. So that is the fundamental of Agile, is constantly improving, being time boxed, and and of course solving the problem for a customer.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. Personally, I am happy to be here today for what I got from you today in terms of the minimal valuable product. I think there's a lot of us who have the same problem. We think on the final product in terms of how perfect it can be in that perspective. Now, in your introduction, I heard the word psychology there's psychology in you.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit heavy to go back to a skateboard while you want to build a car, and as a product builder in that perspective. So in psychology, how can you help someone to go back?
Think of it this way. You want to build a car, you want to build an operating system of your product, like meaning you want to build something massive, meaning you know exactly what you want to build, right? But what you don't know is how is the customer really going to perceive it. And this is based on different market economic or economic events, or it can be different. It can be based on different things. The customer might perceive it wrong. So the psychology behind it is that if you talk to the customer early enough and you come to them with a solution early enough, they will be happy to give feedback to you so that you can go on to the next solution. So that's the psychology of it, is that you do not need to wait and go 4 quarters or 4 sprints without even touching or even going to the customer with something and saying, hey, here it is. Give me feedback on it. I know you wanted a car. That's why it's not necessarily a smile. It's but they know that you are actually solving a problem of transportation. So there is from the first presentation, there's something in which you've actually captured. So they will be happy to build and go on with you. And actually, maybe someone may even, of course, like I say, you get maybe $2,000 here, $10,000 here, $50,000 here, and they'll be improving. And from a business value point of view, is that this $2,000 can go back into your business to further the next product into the market. So you get you get customer insight, which is invaluable early and before the competition does, right? You said big data. Everyone wants big data, but only a few companies like ourselves will be able to do it as fast as possible. But then, but because of the amount of resources that we have behind us. But if you have few resources, what do? You have to go early to the customer and get information really fast. All right?
Hello. Thank you for an amazing talk. I just wanted to know, because like my brother said, a lot of product managers face this challenge, especially with products that are already been released. You find that a product is 3-4 years into development, and there's a business pressure from the business owners. So my question was, when you talk about minimum viable product, yes, that's the word I was looking for, viable product. I know the meaning of it when you're talking about the customer, viable to the customer. That's fine.
The same estimation practice in which they give us a pseudo scale for story A and story B. Does that make sense? So they'll say that story A. Story A is a 5, right? That meaning that, which is is a 8, right? Meaning that it's not that important to them, right? But story B is a 20, right? So now all you got to do is divide, right? Divide this by 8, divide this by 20, and then you get a number, right? Which represents what the developers say, and what the business says. Quick math here. 20 divided by 8? Huh? 2.5? 2.5. And 8 divided by 20, negative something? Huh? 0.4. So this number right here quickly tells you which one you need to work on. You need to work on this higher, this easy item that, though it's this harder item. I'm sorry. Yeah, you need to work on the one that is closest, that is lowest first. That brings the maximum input, but is the easiest to do. So you will get a scale of all your user stories. You'll get a scale, and when you take that to any stakeholder, they'll love it because they will know that there's nothing I can do about it. It's what I'm getting getting feedback from all parts of the organization as to how this is done. All right. Any other question about Scrum, about Agile? Yeah. And about how we do it at scale at Voda.
Okay. My name is Julius, and sorry, I will ask more about technical as a developer. In Agile, as you said you are a Scrum Master, I was thinking about the way you operate in order to take a developer in your team. Do you really consider that from this university methodology which are used in teaching the developers, and consider to put them in Agile developers? Because in this university, they really don't do this Agile methodology.
Okay. All right, I have good news. Is there anyone here who has a background in HR, human resource?
Yes, myself.
Oh, okay, fantastic. All right. So when we are looking at recruiting for Agile, we would like to recruit what we call T-shaped individuals. Does that make sense? That means that they are the founders will know what T-shape is, meaning that if they will they have a cross skill. I mean, they have a cross skill, meaning that they know many things instead of just development, right? They know, I don't know, they have people skills. They have a little bit of sales. They can support in other areas. That's the cross one. But then they can go deep in certain principles. For example, they can go deep in SQL, or they can go deep in for example, in BI. So we don't necessarily care about whether someone is a good programmer. We care more whether how much of a T person are they, because in a Scrum team or an Agile team, it's cross skills, meaning that you have multiple people in one team, and it has to be independent. In order for it to be a true Scrum team, you cannot have any other. You can't go to all of a sudden go to finance and say, we're doing a solution, we need finance's help to do. No, that finance person has to be in the team, and they have to be either T-shaped, meaning that they can actually do other things as well. So what you'll end up finding that you're not necessarily focused on the skill per se. Your entire team is focused on providing the solution itself. So whatever it takes, use your language skills, use your data analytics skills, whatever it takes. So that's what we look at when we're trying to recruit for a Agile team. That's what you guys should look forward to. Any more questions?
Is there any failure that has ever happened in your Scrum team, and what are lessons that we can get from it?
Okay, all right. So every day, yeah. So Scrum is an iterative process. Means that we iterate, we go through a iteration cycle, which kind of looks like that, right? I don't know if I'm drawing it right, and then you pull out a product, right? So what will end up happening is that since you iterate here, and then you get something, right? You get a product. You iterate here, you get a product, right? What will end up happening is that people will start building anti-culture. They will start building things that that are not necessarily helping them solve the solution. You know, engineers, architects, they love seeing down the road. I don't know if there's any architects in this here. They love seeing down the road. They love seeing the car, right? But getting them to break that concept and focus more on building a solution is difficult. So you'll find them getting back into their old pattern of planning 6-8 months in advance, you know, instead of planning planning two weeks in advance. So that's an anti-pattern. You always have to be learning, and you have to increase the learning as fast as possible. So by the time you have left the customer and you're now on your own. In fact, in all our meetings, we always have a red chair on the side, and we say that, okay, that's the customer. You know they're not here, but you guys need to be thinking about them all the time, in every single meeting. No one sits in that chair. So the biggest mistake I find in a lot of agile teams is that they will get used to, because Scrum works. Scrum is a methodology. Agile isn't. Agile is just a way of thinking, but Scrum is a methodology. So they'll get used to coming to work. Okay, we're going to do a stand-up. We're going to talk about what we're doing today. If there's any impediment, we're going to move on. So they get used to but they never go back and revisit the customer and apply that learning into building their next. Final. Did I help answer your question? All right. Any final questions? All right, two. You and everybody. All right. You want to start first? All right.
Let's talk about this MVP. How does that MVP plays to startups? Because imagine at the first place you're providing a product that is boring to customer, and expect that at the quarter 3 you get a customer expectation. How does this play? Because you can't provide at the first place, you provide a boring product, and at the second quarter you provide the same, it is boring, and then you expect that at the quarter 3 you get the customer.
Are you talking on the lines of saying that you're giving something that the customer doesn't want? Is that what you're saying? The true MVP should never give something the customer doesn't want. It should always be customer centric. The size has to be minimum, but you have to bring the value. So even though that's why I put numbers at the bottom of this. Even though you're not reaching 50 customers, you will at least reach 2. Then what we will look at when we examine your business, we'll know that this guy has 2 customers. Now you have to think about more lines about what Nisha talked about. How do you guys grow up and get to 50? But then that is the methodology in which you guys will need to. Did I help answer? Okay.
And can I make a quick comment on that too? Because I hope I didn't give people the wrong idea. Every step of what we do, we are changing our product and iterating. So I'm not saying you come up with what's going to scale at the beginning. You go through what Rome is saying again and again. Like, we're on version, we're constantly testing and improving. And so when you do something wrong, you're learning from that if the customer doesn't like something, and then you're going to make it better instead of thinking you know what the customer likes and then just designing for that. So even for us, we're still changing it every week and every month to try and improve it.
That's good.
I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
Methodology, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned
So I'm going to run a business case, and then you can nod and say maybe that's wrong or that's right. But I'm looking at a route to scalability.
Okay.
So you have a product that's an e-ticketing platform for regional buses, right? That's what we're doing as FUSA. And you're trying to get an easy way for consumers to actually book a bus ticket and get on a bus and travel, right? So my first iteration is there are very many channels that you can get on to actually attract your consumer, which is your first problem, right? There are different ways of doing it, but with the 1% and your mass consumer, who's your main consumer, being on your SSD, that means I'm looking at Q1 and saying that is my first viable product, right? If I'm going through MVP, right? So I'll create my SSD platform, and that'll be my first thing. I'll get bus vendors on it, and people will be able to book on that, right? If the consumer comes back and says, we're looking at adding more value on your product, that means I'm coming back in my second iteration and looking at it and saying, who else can I reach, or what is my consumer saying about my current product, right? But there's a slack line because now I have two people I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with my consumer, and I'm dealing with a vendor who actually is the bus owner, who wants to fill his bus. Right. So in my second iteration, I go and say, I want a management system for the bus owner to be able to view his bus ticketing, and for the consumer to be able to see visibility on what he buys. Let's say current updates on where the bus is, or what the bus is at a full capacity and he can get a ticket today or tomorrow, right? Probably in version 3, I'll say I'll create a different channel. Is that correct? If we run through the user journey of, at the end, I want to arrive at an e-ticketing platform that is also a CRM for business vendors and a platform for consumers to actually be able to book for their transport needs across the region. Is that correct?
Have you identified the core customer for that e-ticketing?
Yes, it's my mass consumer.
Which is the bus owner? Yeah. It's the end customer.
The end customer, because you want to offer a zero transaction.
Okay.
So no fees for the consumer initially.
Right. So if that's, again, I would not want to focus too much. This is your vision of making this is what will make the customer happy, is this e-ticketing system. I would advise that you speak primarily with the customer themselves. The customer is the one that gets their money, even though they're paying through the bus company itself. The customer is the one that's actually getting their money out of their pocket. So that's the money that you want. So I would focus more on that customer's feedback than anyone in between. Maybe you might even end up cutting out the middleman if you do it right. Yeah?
That's right.
Yeah, so the question was...
I was just trying to go through the user journey to understand it better. All right. You mentioned the final product of where you want to get to.
Yeah.
But how do you start it and scale it up? Because that's also a very important thing in any startup. Yeah. I have to start somewhere to actually make revenue, to actually scale it up and actually beyond. And there's no investor who will come in and tell you want to build a full product to a certain scale, and this will cost this much. Because that, you will not understand your consumer if you don't understand the journey you're taking them through.
Yes, you're right. I want to, if there's anything that you guys leave here with, I want to highlight one thing, is the V in MVP, meaning that you have to spend time with your customer more than you spend time with your product. Okay? I don't know if I've helped you.
That's true.
Okay, all right, thank you guys.
Thanks a lot.
All right, guys. I think Isaac, I don't know if I've gone over.
Maybe one more question.
Any burning questions?
Anyone has I have to ask this, I have to ask this.
You guys ask really good questions. And by the way, I'm still around, so if you guys want to touch base with me, I'll be doing a networking session. We have a networking session, right?
Yes.
All right, so we'll be able to exchange more ideas. Yes.
Maybe you need to talk about time to from, let's say you want to create a product and you want to use the MVP model. So how long does it take from maybe the first version to the final version? A year, 2 years, 1 month, 2 weeks?
Okay, with Agile, there is, or with Agile development, there is literally no end to how much value you're giving if you're continuing to engage with your customer. Does that make sense? So don't look here and say this is the end. What we do in our teams is that we see an indefinite roadmap as to continue how we're more focused on creating a machine, a dependable machine that's creating value repetitively. And with this little math, not only repetitively, but with values in it, meaning that we can know that with this team they will only make 28 values every 2 weeks. Does that make sense? So it's more about building a machine that can repeat itself. So that way you'll know how to spend your money. Once you reach the car, you'll know that, okay, I want to improve this money. You now have a machine. So it's not, I don't want to say it's a time of 2 weeks. It can be 2 weeks, it can be 2 months, it can be a year. But I would advise that you keep the time frame short to to bring value. But your end goal, you shouldn't have an end goal at all. Your goal should be more, how do I scale up the value that I'm giving to my core customer? All right.
Yes, I am. Since you're working at Vodacom, for how long have you been in Vodacom?
3 years now.
3 years, okay. So I think we might be related somehow in terms of the products that you guys have actually worked on. Can we get an example that I would, or anybody here would relate to one product, so we see how you guys were phasing? And
I will actually take that.
Okay,
we can talk about this during our break. Is it okay?
No worries,
All right.
Thanks.